Review. It's 10 minutes before 6 o'clock. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has a number of questions about the arrest by Fredericton Police of a controversial New Brunswick blogger who regularly criticizes the police force. Charles LeBlanc was arrested 2 weeks ago and may be facing criminal libel charges for comments he posted last summer about a Fredericton City police officer. In a letter to the Fredericton Police Chief and copied to Attorney General Marie-Claude Blais, the association asks the police chief to address a number of concerns, not the least of which is the use of police resources in this kind of investigation. Cara Zwibel is director of the Fundamental Freedoms Program with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, and she joins us now. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Let's look at your concerns with this case. We'll go through them one by one.
The biggest concern has to do with the use of this particular provision of the criminal code. The criminal libel provisions are very broad, and we understand that this may be a charge under Section 301 of the code, which really allows charges to be laid where someone has potentially said something defamatory, so something that might harm someone's reputation, but doesn't require any intent to defame. It doesn't require even that the statements be false. So you could very well be on the hook for something here when what you said is true, or is maybe just a fair criticism or a fair comment.
And why is that wrong?
Well, it's wrong for people to be criminally prosecuted for stating their opinions. And certainly for making true statements. If we expect in a democracy to have a good debate about what our public officials are doing, about policy issues, we need to have space to make statements. And if we're concerned that we're going to be hauled into a criminal court because we've said something that someone finds harmful to their reputation, that really chills the debate.
Where does the onus lie? Does one have to prove they're not true, or what?
This provision, Section 301 of the Criminal Code, has been found to be unconstitutional by a number of lower courts. That relates to the fact that really all the police would need to show under this section is that this is a defamatory statement, which just means that it might harm someone's reputation or, lower their reputation in the eyes of someone else. But there's no issue of truth, there's no issue of intention, and so that's the real problem with this provision.
What examples are there of this section of the criminal code being used in the rest of the country, and what has happened as a result?
There's a few cases that I'm aware of where the provision's been struck down. So in one Ontario case involving people who were standing with placards that were making statements critical of correctional officers in a penitentiary. They were charged under this provision, and the court said the provision was unconstitutional, again, because of this concern about, no requirement of intent, no defense of truth, all of these various problems with it. There's a Newfoundland case that deals with this provision as well, where it was struck down. There's a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada dealing with another criminal libel provision. That case upheld Section 300 of the code, which does have a requirement of intention. But in the lower court, Section 301 was also on the table. The lower court had said that section was unconstitutional, and that was never appealed. So we have multiple jurisdictions saying there's a real problem with this provision of the criminal code, which just makes it more disturbing when it's used by a police force or when charges are laid under that provision, because we have courts saying this is a problem from a freedom of expression perspective. It severely limits freedom of expression, and it doesn't do so in a way that's reasonable.
Well, even if Mr. LeBlanc is not charged in the end, what concerns might you continue to have?
There is like I said, a chilling effect here. When people read about these kinds of things, they're going to think twice before they speak out. And, people may have very valid criticisms, not just of the police, but of public officials, of corporations. There's lots of instances where not just the criminal law of defamation, but also civil defamation suits can be used to try to shut people up, to try to get critics to to clam up, and that's a very real concern for us. So even if, no charge is laid, even if this ultimately results in an acquittal, or just a disposition of the charge that doesn't, bring it forward, there's a concern that people may not be willing to say things anymore because of fear of those kinds of consequences.
And if he is charged, what role might the Civil Liberties Association play?
It will depend, but we have intervened in cases like this before. We'd have to see what would happen in this particular case, but the case I mentioned in Ontario was a case where we acted as an intervener, which means we go to the court and we make submissions on the law, why we think the law is unconstitutional, and that might be something that we would consider in a case like this as well.
And what concerns do you have that the police force is acting on behalf of one of its members?
Well, that raises some other issues. I think, as I said, regardless of who the complainant is, there's a problem with this provision of the code. But the fact that the complainant may be a police officer means that we're concerned about the level of independence, what role that particular officer has played or has not played in the investigation of this charge, and what kind of oversight mechanisms exist when the complainant in a criminal matter, any kind of criminal matter, is a police officer.
How surprised are you that this has even come up?
It is surprising. Like I said, criminal libel charges are fairly rarely used, and I think that's probably because, at least with respect to this particular provision, most people know that courts have said there's a problem here. So it is surprising and disturbing that this has happened this way.
Thank you so much for speaking with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cara Zwibel is the director of the Fundamental Freedoms Program with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. If you have anything you'd like to say about the interview or anything you've heard here on Shift this afternoon, you can let us know. Call our talkback line, 1-800-632-7743, or email us at shift@cbc.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Shift New Brunswick. Become a friend, and we're on Twitter as Shift and